Testing. Your belt
Cool.
or something. Or
Testing, testing. Yeah, sound okay?
Maybe a little higher.
Testing, testing. Hello, hello, hello. Yeah? Yeah. Just yell at me if I need to move it.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our morning speech. This morning, I'm pleased to introduce to you Mike Steichen. He's a senior software engineer, consultant, and engineering manager at Focused, where he helps teams tackle real-world challenges, sometimes with code, sometimes with a broader set of tools. He began coding a bit later in life after a chance encounter with a bootcamp instructor at a Chicago coffee shop where he worked. Since graduating from Dev Bootcamp Chicago in 2014, Mike has been immersed in the biotech and tech consulting worlds, contributing to initiatives at both large enterprises and small startups. Although he enjoys digging into code across the full stack, his true passion lies in mentoring junior developers and guiding teams towards people-centric solutions. He believes that while programming can feel overwhelming at first, it's not magic, it's a craft anyone can learn with patience and perseverance. Originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma, Mike has also lived in Germany, Austria, Chicago, and Houston, and he now resides back in Tulsa with his spouse and their young son. In his free time, he loves exploring local coffee shops, attending live music events, and going on bike rides. Please give it up for Mike Steichen.
Hey, friends. Hello. Hear me all right? Check, check, check. Cool. Yeah, my name is Michael Steichen. I go by Mike Steich. Do whatever permutation of my name you like. Really happy to be here today. I want to be here for like 20 to 30 minutes, right? So hold me to that. And I want to share some practical advice that I think you'll find helpful. At least I hope you do. So I'll be hanging out at the end if you have any questions or want to connect. But yeah, let's dive right in. So who the heck am I? Why should you believe me? Like Tomas said, I'm from here. When I graduated from Boca T, I moved up to Chicago and then bounced around to Germany, Austria, Houston. I worked in the coffee industry for a while. I taught English. I'm a failed jazz musician. So yeah, suffices to say, I play the saxophone. Not good enough apparently, but anyway, suffices to say I do not have a traditional computer science background, but a quarter life crisis kind of got me thinking like, okay, like what am I gonna do here? And I don't know, I had always thought computers were cool, but I thought that like it was too late. And I was like, I wasn't like the computer whiz kid in high school, like hacking the library, you know, or like, you know, doing those sorts of shenanigans. But yeah, I realized like that's a myth, right? Like you can learn it. And then in 2014, I made my first like Hello World app, and then found a boot camp in Chicago, checked it out, and graduated. And so since then, I've been a software engineer, mostly in the consulting space, and I've since become an engineering manager. But yeah, I'm super pumped to be back in Tulsa. And yeah, you'll find me chasing my toddler around whatever park he decides to run around in that day. So yeah, I would describe myself as like a full stack dev, jack of all trades type person. I've written code in Java and C#.NET, Kotlin, all different flavors of JavaScript. Worked with Elasticsearch and GraphQL and Postgres, and you get the idea. So yeah, I've worked with bigger companies that you might recognize, and I've worked with like small startups that nobody's ever heard of, and everything in between, right? So today I thought it would be helpful to go through like an array of items that's, pun, an array of things that I wish I had known 10 years ago. And some of them are coding related, some of them are personal, some of them are kind of a mix of in between. But yeah, let's dig in. First thing that's super important, do not become emotionally attached to your code. This might sound kind of silly, but hear me out. When I first got computers to do things, it felt like a superpower, right? Like I was getting computers to do tedious things automagically, and then people started to pay me money to do it, and it felt even more incredible, right? Like my code, my precious baby was doing stuff, right? I was hitting this API, and I was getting JSON, and I was throwing it on the web page, and it was like responsive and looked cool on a phone and a big screen, and like everything was great, right? But then the business decides to go in a different direction, right? They scrap the product, so my code goes in the bin. Or a more senior colleague takes over my code, and rewrites it so that it's like unrecognizable. And then maybe the client stakeholder I was working with on a feature, they resign from their job because people quit their jobs all the time, right? So now all of a sudden this feature I worked on gets thrown in the bin, and like nobody at the company really wants it anymore or understands it, right? So like the first like 600 times this happened was like devastating. I was like, you know, like what a waste, right? Like, why don't you like my code? Like, I worked so hard on it, and now you're just gonna throw it away. But like that 601st time, right? I like realized like, okay, like this is reality, right? It's just code. It wasn't a waste of time. Like every act of coding is itself a learning process, right? And like nobody can take those lessons away from you. And moreover, like the last thing you want to do is maintain some piece of code that nobody wants or uses or understands, right? So just get rid of it, right? The business needs will absolutely change, and they have to change because they need to make money to pay you to have a job, right? Your client stakeholders will definitely change their mind because they're humans. They're going to change their mind. That's good. That's normal. That means they're engaged with your products, right? Your colleagues, they will definitely touch your code, right? They'll delete it. They'll modify it. They'll rename variables, right? That's normal. That's going to happen, right? It's also like not really your code. It's your company's code, depending on your employer agreement. So like, you know, change your pronouns there. It helps. Anyway, all that's to say, like, be proud of the code you write. Like, be proud that your Git signature is like tied to that line, right? But, you know, don't develop like an overwhelming emotional attached to it because it is going to go away. Another thing I don't think I appreciated before I really got into this industry was that it's a trade. It's a digital trade, right? But it's going to be messy sometimes. Like you're not going to be like covered in like sawdust and grease, right? But like, I don't know. I thought it was going to be like this like super sleek modern like thing. Like I'd be sitting at this really cool desk and like I'd be like furiously typing and it'd be like the Matrix like screensaver thing, right? And I'd be working on the latest technologies all the time. It'd be super cool. And people would be so impressed with the work I was doing. But like it's more like a home improvement show on a TV where it's like you have this like big design plan and it's gonna be beautiful and you're gonna do this open concept design and then you tear down the wall and there's mold everywhere, right? Or there's a tree root that's like growing around a pipe and it turns out there's like the electrical is like miraculously still there. It should have burned down the house like a year ago, but like, you know, anyway, it's like that. And I don't mean to like scare you or discourage you, but just like, again, managing expectations that this is a trade and a lot of the work you're going to be doing is not going to be very glamorous or like cool sounding, but it's still super, super important. And you can get a job in it, right? So yeah, the same type of thing, like the home improvement metaphor, it's gonna happen, right? You're gonna like wanna build a feature and it's gonna take like twice as long and be twice as hard because you thought it'd be super easy, but they're using like a decades-old version of Java or some dependency, and it's going to be a super big pain to upgrade. Or a new operating system gets released overnight, and all of a sudden, like half your users like can't use your app, and you have to fix it. Or maybe like a sales rep promises like that the enterprise app that you're going to license from them can do everything, and it integrates with everything, and it's super well documented, trust me. And then you like license it and try it out, and it's like none of those things, right? So I guess the TLDR for this slide is just like accept and expect work to be a mess sometimes, right? Even though it's digital. But the good news is that there's a lot of work to be done, and you can get paid to do it. So this one is a little trite, I know, because I'm basically just saying like, networking, do it, right? But it's super important. Like Tomas said, like I got my first job because one of my regulars at the coffee shop I worked at ran a company. And like I had no idea that he did that. I just like knew Daniel because I made him lattes for like 2 years. And I knew that he coded stuff because I like, pick up dirty dishes and I could see his editor. And I was like, okay, well like I'll talk to him and see if he has any advice for me. And like, yeah, we got to talking and I got a paid internship. So like little things like that, right? Don't discount them, right? Like when you are on the way to like start looking for a job, like tell everybody you know, like I am looking for jobs, and try and do it in real life too. Like spamming, the interwebs like with your resume to like 1,000 different companies. Like it's a method, but it's not going to yield like super quality results. That's that one. Related to jobs and interviews. If you do not know something, do not pretend you know something. There are times when saying I don't know might negatively impact your reputation or credibility, right? So here are some alternatives, but do not say that you know something or understand something when you do not, because you will get in trouble. And especially in an interview, like the person interviewing will be able to tell whether you're making it up as you go along. So Google alternatives, right? Memorize them. And it'll not just like affect your reputation and credibility, but it'll kind of switch your mindset too, where it's like, oh my God, I don't know something. It's, oh no, like, of course I don't know it. It's impossible to know everything. But, we can take a look at it right now. So, speaking of not knowing things, you absolutely will and should ask for help. You need to ask questions. And it takes a lot of courage to ask for help. I remember early in my career, like agonizing for hours about whether to ask for help or when to ask for help or how to ask for help. And when I did finally do it, sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't really work. So I like this framework a lot. It's from Stack Overflow. So Google, Stack Overflow, how to ask a question. I like this framework a lot. Because it's so easy to ask a bad question. Like, I'm not kidding y'all. Like, so many times, like, working with, like, people who've been doing it for a long time, they're, like, channeling, like, a channel with, like, 100 people in there. Like, hello, I'm getting an error. Java, please help. And it's like, dude, like, come on. Like, what are you doing here? Like, what's happening? What have you tried? Do you have a stack trace? Do you have an error message? Did you read it? Did you Google it? What have you tried so far, right? Everybody who can help you probably wants to help you, but they're busy doing their own thing, right? Like the thing you're working on is like super important to you. That's your little corner of the universe. But everybody else you're working with has their own little corner of the universe too, right? So respect their time, do your homework, and a fun side effect is that you might actually answer your own question while you go through this rubric, right? So this doesn't mean you need to type like a whole novel and expect like, everybody to read like word for word, like your 1,000-word essay single-spaced about what's going on, right? That's a classic TLDR. But, at least you can show your work. And use some emoji, keep it light, throw in some links to documentation, put in a little stack trace in a code block, learn your tools. When you're crafting those questions and pondering those answers, you need to be curious and learn why. This applies to both coding situations on your own, but also in meetings with folks. I've been in so many situations where I'm working with a client or stakeholder, and they're like, hey, can you just add a big red button on this page, and then when you click it, it does this other thing, and make it really big and really red. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that, because I want that dopamine boost, I want that ego boost, right? It's yeah, I could do that. I could do that by the end of today. But the downside of that is that you don't know what problem you're trying to solve for. So while you can create that big red button that does the thing, you don't understand why, right? You could be coding a solution for something that makes absolutely no sense. There could already be a big red button on another part of the app, and you just need to show the user hey, click over here, and there it is, right? Problem solved. So the TLDR for that one is beware of solution jumping, right? Before you really understand what's going on. And then as far as the coding part goes, always keep asking why until you get no further, right? So if I'm getting a null response from some service or endpoint, and I'm getting a null pointer exception, okay, add a null guard. Problem solved. Let's go to lunch. I could do that, but then wait a minute. Why is it null though? Why is it null though? I can't tell you how many times I've asked that question, or somebody's asked me that. So digging in a little bit more, why is it null? Oh, it turns out the service we depend on isn't working right, and it's returning null. Well, why isn't it working right? Oh, turns out the certificate is expired or whatever. Let's fix that, right? So if you had just covered up the null with a null guard and called it a day, you would have been concealing and masking a deeper issue, right? So always learn why. Learn your tools. I don't care what tool it is, if it's Vim or Emacs or VS Code or a JetBrains tool, Sublime, you get the idea. As long as it's relatively modern and well supported and has a good community, use it. But learn to use it, right? Shortcuts are cool. Learn how to use debugging tools in your editor and whatnot. The profiling performance stuff can be cool from time to time to see how much test coverage you have, or where performance bottlenecks might be. Time spent in the terminal is well spent. I'm not saying you have to become a bash wizard, but having some degree of fluency in the terminal will pay dividends, no matter what operating system you're working on. Has anybody read Hacker News or check it out from time to time? I'm getting the nod and the so. Yeah, check it out. My teachers told me 10 years ago to read it, and I was okay. So I'm telling you now, check it out. It's one of 2 websites that I read every day. It's a news aggregator, kind of article paper aggregator, and it's upvoted based on user submissions, right? So, but the community is pretty good. It's a more respectful Reddit, and yeah. So it's a good way to keep a pulse of what the industry is talking about and whatnot. So yeah, check it out. But nothing is more important to read than error messages. And you are going to read a lot more code than you're going to write, and error messages are a critical part of that. For real, read it. Sit with it. Think about what it's telling you, right? I used to be terrified of error messages because I took it personally, right? I thought that I was in a video game and I was losing points and I was running out of lives, and my breath would quicken and my pulse rate would increase. But error messages are feedback, right? They're telling you what's going on. They're a very loud feedback mechanism, right? They can be poorly phrased or kind of awkward and make a weird sound when they happen, but they are your friend. They keep you on track, right? It's feedback. Feedback is good. Just as error messages are not your enemy, neither is the business. It's really easy for tech folks and developers to kind of develop this like us versus them mentality. The them being like advertising, the advertising department or the marketing department or leadership or management. It's like, these people are slowing us down, right? Like, I just want to like code stuff and build stuff, and like, I want to rewrite everything in this new, like, I want to rewrite the entire app in Vue or Svelte or whatever. But you really need to be careful about that mentality. My favorite example of this was 2 years ago, I think. I was working with this guy, and he was a really passionate engineer, and he really wanted to refactor this like entire monolithic application that was super, super important to the business. And he had like written it down, right? He did a proposal. It was like 5 pages long. He summarized the problem. He identified how he was going to improve it and how those improvements would help and how it would address all this tech debt. And he estimated kind of roughly how long it would take and how expensive it would be to do it. So like, he tried, right? He did his homework. But there was one like really, really, really big critical problem, and that's that the company he worked for was bankrupt. And the co-founders had warrants out for their arrests. Like seriously, like they were from Australia and they had like committed fraud, and so like the SEC equivalent of Australia like had a warrant out for these folks' arrest, and so my dude, like lift yourself up from your keyboard, like look up from your screen. Like, things are not good. I'm surprised you have a job right now. Like, your company just got acquired by a private equity group, and you need to be brushing up your resume, not coming up with like a 5-page proposal about how to refactor some application that doesn't exist anymore, by the way. The company went under. But all that's to say, become friends with people outside your department, right? Learn what your colleagues do, right? Be curious, learn what problems they have, because you might actually be able to come up with a solution to a real problem or something that they really hate doing. So look up from your keyboard, don't hide in your cubicle, either literal or figurative. Have you ever seen anyone code themselves out of a job? No. It's more common to just be no, I haven't seen that. Not yet, but I'll keep my eyes open. Yeah. It's more just sorry, layoffs. Good luck. Got a few more here for you. Code is not the only solution to every problem ever. It's just a tool, right? It's just code. There's a saying that you may have heard where it's if you have a hammer, all of a sudden everything looks like a nail, right? And so the same thing applies to code. So beware, similar to the learn why slide from a couple slides ago, beware of just jumping in and building something without first asking yourself hey, why are we building this feature? Or does it need to exist? Or does it already exist, right? How will this add value to the business? If I build this, how will we maintain it? I think my favorite example of this is a CSV parsing library. It is so tempting to want to do it yourself, right? It's I could parse CSV, I can do that. And that's a good academic exercise. Do it here, that would be fun. But there are thousands of CSV parsing libraries out there that are open source, free to use, and they're probably going to be better and faster and have better test coverage than whatever you can crank out in an afternoon. So just remember, sometimes you don't need to code. Just take a step back and hold up. This one is more of a personal one, but I think it applies to everybody. Switching careers is really hard, and it can exacerbate or reveal a lot of issues that you may have been covering up or coping with or ignoring. And in tech, you're expected to keep learning new languages, right? You could end up spending like entire days at home working remotely in your office, not really talking to humans, not touching grass. You could, be terrified of like breaking something or, pushing a bug to production. And this was really my biggest hurdle in retrospect over the last 10 years, was just ignoring my anxiety and how it affected me. It wasn't like I don't know, some people think like, oh, if I had just learned like Java 10 years ago, like I could be making so much more money, right? No, for me, it was just like ignoring how my own mental health was affecting my work. And like I had a job, right? I was paying my bills, but still I was like so limited by my anxiety that I was taking too long to deliver things. Like I was obsessed with making everything perfect. I spent hours and hours rechecking code because I was convinced I wasn't doing it right? When bugs are gonna happen, you're gonna break stuff, and then you fix it. It's software, right? It's soft. So yeah, in my case, therapy and talking to my doctor was the right combo for me. So you all know whatever your career you end up in, whatever job you have, just like take it seriously. It's not like woo-woo emotional stuff. It can really have an impact on your personal and professional life. Last one here. Whatever work you end up doing, whatever language you end up working in, just remember to focus on the fundamentals. You might not get a job working with like maybe you like really love React and TypeScript and you're fascinated by Go, and you get a job and it's in some technology that you haven't heard of, right? Like that's okay, right? A for loop is like basically the same in every single language, right? So like don't be discouraged. The tech stack that you work on today is not going to be the one that you work on tomorrow, right? And even in like the age of AI, right? Like AI assisted coding is really, really cool. I'm starting to dabble in it. But even then, you have to understand what it's building out for you, and you have to be able to fix it when it breaks. So none of these are magic. You might not be familiar with them yet, but they are not magical. There are people out there to help you, and yeah, focus on the fundamentals. That's it. Really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Yeah. At my place, we practice test-driven development. That's like our rule. If there isn't a test, I'm expected to write it. I also pair program most days. So that's one advantage of pairing is your pair kind of keeps you accountable, right? Definitely don't sleep on testing. I'm on a project right now for a few months and I got thrown on it and there's like very little test coverage and everybody's stressed because it keeps breaking and nobody knows why. I wonder why.
Other questions for Mike?
Yeah. What's up?
Oh. So when you talk about doing pair programming, is that like pretty much an all day, start of day to end of day? Like
it depends on the project. But yeah, for the most part, it is that. Like, we it depends on the project, right, and what your working agreement is with your team. Sometimes we switch pairs every week. Sometimes we switch them every day. But yeah, for the most part, I'm calling up one of my colleagues, and we're pairing and sharing screens and talking it out. So that's been a game changer for me personally. But
Cool.
what's up?
Nitty gritty, like what does pair programming look like?
Sure.
What you do it?
What does pair programming look like? For me, I have my pair for the day. I'm shooting them a Slack message saying, hey, you ready to pair? We start either, we use lots of different apps. We use Pop. Sometimes we use Teams or Slack, Huddles, Google Meet, whatever video conferencing thing you prefer. Pop is really good though for remote control and whatnot. But yeah, one person is the driver, one person is the navigator. That's the typical paradigm we do. So the driver has their hands on the keyboard. The navigator is more guiding the driver, making sure we stay on track, pointing out annoying typos and syntax errors and whatnot. So yeah, sometimes we, when we're doing test-driven development, we will ping pong. So it's like, okay, I will write a failing test, and then I'm going to push it up, and you're going to pull down the changes. We'll switch screens, and then you make the test pass, right? So that's like the prototypical beautiful pairing setup. But sometimes it doesn't work, right? You get tired, you have doctor appointments. I am here right now talking to you all, so you stay flexible. But
So is there a time whenever you're driving and somebody's navigating you and you are stumped on something, do y'all ever switch
yeah, absolutely.
positions? Does it happen frequently?
Yeah. I think it depends on the pair. Sometimes you're in the zone. Sometimes you get exhausted. If you're the navigator, right, you kind of can tell. It's like the beauty of pairing. It's like, hey, you're speaking really quickly and you're not really thinking or listening to me. Like, hey, how about you get some water and let's switch it up, And they're normally like, oh yeah, good idea. Let me push this up. So, yeah.
I have a question. So, from your experience,
So for a hiring manager, during an interview or something, what do you think is the biggest green flag? Like not correlated, just green flag,
Yeah, good question. Do you seem interested in the job? And do you know what
That's good.
it is?
I can do that.
I've been in so many interviews with folks where, it sounds obvious, right?
Yeah.
But I've been in so many interviews where, and this was a few years ago when the hiring market was super, super hot. So I think, especially folks with experience kind of had more leverage. So, I'd ask them cool, so what do you know about, the company? And they're like, yeah, I don't know. I think you it's consulting or something. And it's okay, all right. Well, do you want to be here? I want to be here. So, yeah, that's a green flag. Is proving to me that you've researched what the company does. Having questions, at the end of an interview, I like to keep it open for questions, and it's so painful and sad when they're like, no, I'm good. It's really? Come on. You should be squeezing as much time out of the interview as possible. Keep them talking, show interest, right? You should be, forcing me to be hey, sorry, I have to go pick up my kid from daycare right now. I'm sorry, good to chat with you, right? Get every last moment out of it. So, and try and make them good questions too, right? Not just
Right.
what do you like about working here? If you're, I don't know, working with Lufthansa, Google what's up with Lufthansa in the news lately. See what their problems are, right?
Yeah.
So that would be my personal green flags.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So earlier you talked about how coding isn't always the answer, the hammer and the nail comparison. So in an average day, besides coding, how are you contributing to the company to improve it or do business per se?
totally. It can look like being in a conversation with stakeholders and kind of translating between different departments, right? So like right now my project is working for a third-party insurance claims adjuster, or a claims administrator, which sounds just as thrilling as it is. Anyway, so we have very highly skilled subject matter experts in that domain, and then we have like folks who code, and then we have project managers who are in the middle trying to like, you know, do that dance. So like a very valuable contribution I can make to that conversation is saying like, you know, hey business, like we could do this, but it'll probably take a month and it'll be really hard to do and has some risks, and you might not even want us to do it. But instead we could do it this other way, and it would maybe take half the time, and you know, we'd get like 80% of what we need. You know, so like offering folks options, especially when one of them is easier, like that's a way to contribute without like contributing code. Helping people out when they ask really good questions. What else? If you have, this is one that's really important to me. So I use Slack at most of my, I've used Slack at most of my jobs. And if I have a question, it's really tempting to like DM somebody and be like, hey, can you help me? But if you instead put it in like a public facing channel and, you know, document it well, and then somebody answers that question, like all of a sudden you've created like a searchable repository of knowledge, so that when I get that error message and I read it and I sit with it and I search for it in Slack, like I can find like a solution there. So writing documentation, writing a script. One of my coworkers, like the project I'm on right now has like a separate back-end application and a separate front-end application, so you like have to kind of start two processes on your computer. And I noticed that a lot of people were like opening up this other IDE to like start the back-end process, and it was just too much memory, and like they're like kept complaining about how their computers were too slow and they didn't have enough memory. And I'm like, oh, like how about instead of starting the IDE, you just like do this, you know, bash command that'll start it for you, right? Here's a little bash alias, and I like put it in Slack, and people are like, oh my god, like holy shit, like sorry, pardon my French, like holy crap, like thank you. Like, so little things like that, like where you can kind of grease the wheels for the rest of your team. Participating in meetings, listening, yeah, lots of ways to contribute that aren't just code.
So do you have any good insights on like project management? Or so like, for example, what would be like your workflow for keeping yourself organized on a project, personal or for a business?
Sure. Let's see. Most of the time I'm working in a tool like Jira or Azure DevOps. It's like Microsoft's Jira knockoff, or Trello. You know, they're all the same in a sense. Yeah. I guess is your question like pro tips, stuff like that? Or,
Pretty much, yeah. Just anything that you
I'd
that
say,
like stuck out.
Yeah, I'd say if like the current project I'm on, the tickets and tasks aren't super well written because, you know, everybody's busy, everybody's stressed. It's insurance, it's complicated. So when I ask a clarifying question and then like I get an answer, like I will put that in the ticket. I won't let it like live in a markdown document on my desktop, right? I won't let it live in like a DM with some random person. So if you like learn something and like reach a milestone, like write it down in the ticket. Like make the ticket, the Jira ticket, the Trello ticket, whatever, the source of truth, right? So that way when somebody asks you like, hey, why is the default 5? And is it 5 seconds or 5 minutes? You can either look at the code, or you can be like, you know, oh, well, John said to make the default 5. I put it in the ticket, right? So.
And then I have another one.
Yeah.
What would you describe as like a well-documented piece of code? Not necessarily like in code comment, but like as a maybe like a README or.
Yeah. It exists.
Yeah.
It's a living document, right? Like I've seen stuff where it's like, oh, they got a README, and it hasn't been updated in like 4 years. So yeah, having a README that is easily searchable, right? Because folks don't read documents from top to bottom. They like zero in on like a keyword that they search for, and then they like do a concentric circle outward because they're like, that doesn't make any sense. And then they scroll up a little bit more and they see a code snippet and they're like, oh, okay. And then they scroll up a little bit more and they see like, you know, a paragraph, and then they eventually reach like the header with a nice summary of things. But but yeah, that has also been something that I have found artificial intelligence to be helpful with, is helping me organize my thoughts, and take the, you know, 1 page single spaced, you know, stream of consciousness that I've written out and like kind of organizing it and editing it, right? So yeah. Yeah, great questions. Thank you. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn. Yeah, good luck. I hope to come back soon and hang out and pay